evening. And thank you very much for coming in reasonable number, because these days pollution, traffic, etc. all prevent people from stirring out. This is the 105th session of Art Matters. So we have been at it now for nearly more than 12 years with the gap of the COVID years. And as you know, we feature all the arts and literature and ideas and culture and what you have. This is a special evening because this is devoted to Arundhathi Subramaniam's poetry, especially the new book. Some of you have the copies already, The Gallery of Upside Down Women. Many of you may be knowing her longer than I do, but I'll come to that later. Who was it? A.M. Forster, Anamika would know, yes, who said, just to connect. Only connect. Yeah, only connect. So, in times of utter disconnect, which our times are, massive disconnect, popular disconnect, words with reality and rhythm, poetry with pulse of life, self with the world, time with other times, everydayness with hope and dignity, our ordinariness with our innate weirdness. And this is a book by a weird woman, in some sense. She has an anthology of weird women. In fact, the last 10 or more years, Arundhathi has delved deep into the Bhakti poets and some of the more daring women poets, many of whom would not have come to our attention but for her insistent translations and anthologizing them. And some of them are remembered in this book also. Again, it has a touching relevance because we are living in times of organized, almost conspiratorial amnesia. Forget what happened, or remember what didn't happen. So at a time, we have a poet who not only connects you, but also makes you remember. And that's one of the jobs of poetry all time, but not all poetry all times performs that function. Now I'm going to read out to you some words and lines which I picked up while going through. There will be a conversation and she'll talk about her poetry more. In the introduction, she mentions my upside down tribe. So when I said she is a weird person, I was referring to this upside down tribe to which she now so enthusiastically and so passionately and so meaningfully belongs. Knowing that we long knowing that as long as there are lists, the world is safe. And meaning won't save us, never has, but rhythms will. Rhythms will. Between a green watchfulness, it's a beautiful phrase in somewhere. There's time for roots. This is time for roots. This is time to remain unnamed. How to sing with words. How to singe with pause. Zoomsday, like the doomsday, Zoomsday. A world full of windows, but no sign of a door. Time to see faces without badges, barricades, billboards. Time to be faces again. Tell the bards the women no longer wait for spring or nectar or home. The women no longer wait. Do exactly what you have always done. Just do it upside down. And she keeps on advising, I don't know who, there's a you, but more often than not, she is telling herself. So there is a kind of a self-addressed dialogue, if you like. I know the mind does not surrender its barricades so easily. Others can steal your thunder, but never your light. The emptiest rooms are always full of sun. And this is absolutely beautiful. Perhaps sacrilegious, but nonetheless. Gods weren't baked to be broken. Gods weren't cooked to be frozen. Gods were made to melt. And poets pack up and leave this beloved, infected, distracted world to find there's really nowhere to go. Let them remind you that eyes were always meant to be made of stars and feet of clay. Life is just a rude infinity without citizenship papers, spying tirelessly on itself. When you want to stuff the world through one door, when you want to tell the world there is only one key, but after you let yourself in, for God's sake, drop it. So this is a glimpse of what this book contains. Arundhathi Subramaniam has won many awards, including the Raza Award and the Sahitya Academy Award. And what was it? I was a member of the jury again. Khushwant Singh Award, etc. And she has been, now she divides her time between New York, Bombay, and Madras. No, Chennai, or Coimbatore, whatever they. And she has been a good, great friend of ours for a long time. Although that is not the reason why we have invited her this evening. We have invited, when I read the book, I was so bowled over that I thought that this book deserves better attention. And to the rather poetry literate audiences in Delhi, there must be an occasion where they listen to some solid, good, passionate poetry. So that's the reason why she's here. Anamika is also a Raza awardee and is also a Sahitya Academy awardee, although that is not the reason why we have. Now I think, why can't that be the reason? What's wrong with that? Anyway, so Anamika is a Hindi poet. Novelist, and the one thing common between them, in some sense, is that Anamika has also written about the Theri women, the Theri Gatha, and so they share a certain interest in this lineage of women poets, which mostly we have forgotten or not known much about. So there you are. First, the two part of the program, a three part. The boring part is over. You have now Arundhathi read her poems and talk about her poetry for about 25 minutes or so, and then they will be engaged in a conversation. So, Arundhathi.
Thank you, Ashok. That works too. Okay. I just want a sense of this mic and how it sounds. Does it sound all right? Okay. Thank you, Ashok. Thank you very much. Feels wonderful to be here. It's the first time I'm in this room, so I'm trying to take it all in. I see familiar faces, and that's wonderful. Well, I will come to thanking Anamika, Sanjeev Chaube, many others who make these events happen in there and offer something very distinctive. Each of them brings something to it. But I'll save that for the end. What I wanted to do today is to offer you a sense of what gave rise to this book, and then move from there to a reading of about 4 or 5, maybe 6 poems, and then we'll open this up to a conversation in which I hope you will play a part as well. I look forward to hearing from you. This particular book had its beginnings in it's actually the end of an unplanned trilogy, utterly unplanned. I've been a seeker for as long as I can remember, and I found myself provoked and rescued by mystic poets from across the world. Whether it's been Basho in the Zen tradition, Hafiz, St. John of the Cross, Nammalvar, very particularly Nammalvar, Tukaram, Kabir. I've been lucky to be able to write about some of these subjects of preoccupation. I wrote a book on the Buddha many years ago for Penguin, a book on Satguru, an anthology of bhakti poetry. But a question that remained for me is, where are the women? Where are the women in sacred poetry, and why do we not hear their voices? And that question began gaining momentum some 8 to 9 years ago. And I realized there's a handful of women in this subcontinent that we all know of. We all know, for instance, of Mirabai. I met a Mira just before coming in, who asked me to read a Mira poem, which I will try to do. We all know of Mirabai. There are some of you from South India. We certainly know of Andal. We certainly know of Akka Mahadevi. Some of us know of Lal Ded. But even these women, it feels, have been flattened into a state of calendar art. They seem to be women without hormones, women without hungers, women without bodies. They seem to be ethereal, antiseptic figures, bloodless, conveniently consigned to sainthood. And then I began to discover legions of other women, women from all over the country who've just been consigned to sectarian or regional or linguistic silos. And so an anthology began to take shape that tried to give voice to these women, tried to listen to these women, but to listen to them in polyphony. And these are women of diverse persuasions. So there are women of the heart, women of the head, women who acknowledge the body. There are tantrikas, there are Vedantins, there are Sufis, there are Bhaktas, there are Buddhists. I wanted as messy a pantheon as I could get. But that wasn't it entirely. I also wanted women who smelt dangerous. That was for me important. It's important to me in poetry to have edge. The poems have to make you alert. They have to make you a little uncomfortable. And I found woman after woman doing just that. Unfortunately, we hear them very often as sweet, crooning, dulcet voices. The same Mirabai, whom I thought of as largely decorative, in many ways, decorative in her bhakti, always talking of a kind of swooning surrender, is the same Mirabai who says in one of her poems, she tells this bird, "I'll tear off your wings, I'll rub salt in your beak if you don't bring my Krishna to me now." There's the 14th century Dalit woman mystic Soirabai who says, "If menstrual blood makes me impure, tell me who wasn't born of that blood." Or there is someone like my favorite, Janabai, the 13th century Marathi woman mystic. Let me give you a smell of danger here, right here, translated by Arun Kolatkar. She says in one of her poems, she's a maid servant in the home of a celebrated poet, Namdev. Janabai says, "God, my darling, do me a favor and kill my mother-in-law. I will be lonely when she is gone, but you will be a good God, won't you? And kill my father-in-law. I will be glad when he is gone, but you will be a good God, won't you? And kill my sister-in-law. I will be free when she is gone. I'll pick up my begging bowl and be on my way." That's the kind of gumption that excited me about the poems. It's not necessarily what they were living out in their lives, or we don't know whether they did, presumably not, but the smell of temerity. That's what drew me to these women. There's Rupa Bhavani, a 17th century Kashmiri woman mystic who says, "I have not bowed, I never will. The one who listens stands resplendent within me." That is worship. That is what I do. Not about a bowing, scraping, groveling relationship with the sacred, but looking at it as something to be embodied, not worshipped. To me, much of my work, even in bhakti poetry, has been, in my earlier anthology, Eating God, has been about reframing bhakti. Looking at it not as passive servitude, but as the spirit of self-reclamation, a way to acknowledge all of you. A spirit of inner commitment. To me, that's bhakti. A passionate, tempestuous, erotic, argumentative relationship with the divine, which acknowledges the entire being. This, to me, is what bhakti is about, and this is what these crazy women reminded me of. This is what Rupa Bhavani means when she says, "On the path of Shiva, become Shiva himself." A woman who will settle for nothing less than embodying the sacred, becoming the sacred. And because I had kept such bad company for the past 10 years, it was inevitable that they would leak, some of these women would leak into my own poetry. And so this book happened. The gallery of upside-down women, lots of disreputable women who deserve to be remembered because they are essentially lovers of freedom. That is primarily what draws me to them. Lovers of freedom in their own way, each one of them. And poetry allows you not to play researcher, which I've done in Wild Women, my previous book. Poetry allows you to just dream your way into their lives, to access their voices, to allow them to speak through you, to sometimes presume to speak through them. It allows you to do all kinds of irreverent things that these women would have understood entirely. So I could take those liberties. I'm going to start with the first poem that I'd like to share with you today, Someone asked me which of these women is your favorite, and of course it's a different one every day. But today it is this extraordinary 12th century woman, a Kannada mystic and poet, whom almost everyone has forgotten. Even in Karnataka, there are not many who know her. Her name is Sule Sankava. Sule Sankava wrote poetry to Shiva, we are told. I managed to find one poem. And she also happens to be, in addition to a devotee, she happens to be a prostitute. And she speaks of both with equal candor and a really exhilarating sense of self-confidence. So there's a poem in which she says, the men around me, they're unsurprising. I give them what they want, they give me what I want. It's fine, it's a transaction. She's not blaming them. That's the wonderful thing about these women. They don't play blame games easily. That's the wonderful thing about them. She says it's a transaction, it's fine. But she says, my God is different. She says, my God is Nirlajeshwara, the shameless God. This is a God you don't have to purify yourself to reach. This is a God who will get grubby trying to reach you. And to me, if one does need a God in one's life, some of us do, an external God is a wonderful ally and companion to have for a while, perhaps. If one needs such a God, this is the kind of God I would recommend. The shameless one, whom you can take into every toxic, festering crevice in your consciousness. You don't have to be consumed with guilt, shame, doubt, none of it. He understands. Nirlajeshwara. Let me read you the Sule Sankava poem, which is called God's Forgotten Nickname. I have Sule Sankava in my poem mention a whole lot of women mystics. You don't need to know their names. I mention them because I like naming and because women deserve to be named. They've just stayed unnamed far too long. It's a way of remembering. God's forgotten nickname. Who says harlots don't have choices? We can't choose our clients. And believe me, I've seen them all. Fried, boiled, scrambled, poached, sunny side up, runny side down. But we can choose our gods. I chose mine because he came without a name, and on some nights, without a body. I chose him because he waited his turn, didn't ask me to hurry or clean up, didn't complain about the line of shuffling men at my door. When colleagues badger me for details, I turn sassy. I say, Mahadevi's God unhoused her, Janas deloused her, Andals aroused her, Avayars doused her. Some like them fried, others like them boiled, some like them immaculate. I like my gods soiled. But they aren't impressed. He must have a USP, they claim, a sun sign, an address, for God's sake, a name. I grow quiet. He has a garland of fancy titles, I say, but they don't quite work for me. Perhaps he is the world's greatest lover. But how does that matter when planets shrivel and char in the flaming cemetery of his gaze? And maybe he birthed the three worlds beneath the delirious hurricane of his feet. But how does that count if he's too bloody innocent to read the lurch and plummet of a contrarian heart, the fine print of my breath? And yet, he is mine, friends, for a simple reason. For he rushes to my side when I utter his darkest, most intimate, most forgotten nickname. the one coveted by every god there is, my God, without shame. Thank you. Would you like, here's a choice for you, you have a choice. Would you like a poem about Karekkal Ammayar, the 6th century Tamil woman mystic, or would you like a poem about Amrapali, the Buddhist nun? Up to you. Why did I think you were going to say that? Well, let me say this about Karekkal Ammayar. In many ways, the book derives its title from Karekkal Ammayar. And I want to mention her because this book is really about remembering names that are too often forgotten. So Karekkal Ammayar her name deserves to be uttered in many, many halls, up north as well. Some of us know her in Tamil Nadu, but she deserves to be much more widely known. She's a woman whom we are told wrote ecstatic poems to Shiva, but also chose to walk upside down. That's where the book gets its title. Because each one of these women embody a particular kind of upside downness. We'll talk about that maybe later, what kind of upside downness they represent. So I've done my bit by Karekkal Ammayar. Do look her up. She's fascinating. She's a woman who chose a demonic form. So these are women who flout every understanding of decorative beauty. To me, that's also what makes them fascinating. But we'll speak about Amrapali, whom many of us know thanks to the Hindi film with the beautiful Vaijayanti Mala, right? I grew up seeing it. Amrapali was a courtesan, the beautiful courtesan of Vaishali, who, we are told, meets the Buddha in her lifetime. He met her. She became a patron of the Sangha. It also suggests his own attitude towards socially stigmatized women. He had no problem meeting them or accepting their munificence. And towards the end of her life, she became a nun. And there is a compelling poem in the Terigatha where Amrapali, the aging nun, no longer the young, beautiful Amrapali, the aging nun looks down at her body. And she journeys anatomically southward, starting from her head to her toe. She describes every part of her body, and she says, this is how it once was. This is what it now is. The truth speaker's word doesn't change. The Buddha was right. Life is perishable. The body is transient. All of that. There's heartbreak in that poem, and it also feels like a kind of cautionary tale for women. Beautiful women, beware. You will lose your beauty one day and your youth. But it feels to me like there's more going on in that poem, and I felt Amrapali deserved another one. So I take off from where she leaves off, and I felt Amrapali deserved this. I feel she would approve. It takes the refrain from her poem as its title. The truth speaker's word doesn't change. One morning, you realize the stairway to the cellar will never be completed. The pipes will only grow leakier. The dust motes will swarm more thickly in the evening air. The truth speaker's word doesn't change. The face turns smudgy, quietly generic. The body, that polyglot shrine, where pleasure speaks the same language as prayer, begins its crumble. The lovers vanish, the admirers abdicate. It's too late now, too late. The truth speaker's word doesn't change. What remains? This house of flaking plaster, bandicoots scuttling under the floorboards, limbs growing phantom, windows turning toothless, wind whistling through the rafters of vertebrae, the sky gushing in through the gaze, the spine softening into a ladder of wobble and dissolve. It's true, all of it. The truth speaker's word doesn't change. But what of those evenings, when the sun flirts with the shadows of this golden grove of mangoes, strangely reluctant to depart? What of those evenings when I look out through eyes blurred by room and reverie and see her again? Tawny, high-breasted, proud, that raging beauty of Vaishali, gliding riverine down the street. And how the commoners cheer, and the courtiers gawk, and caparisoned princes turn into speechless teenagers, clammy-palmed, moonstruck, their hearts pounding with desire. Those evenings, what of those? An oak is an acorn in mufti, truth speaker. And in the dark smudge of memory's orchard, I am here still. High priestess of love, goddess extraordinaire, gilded by a blaze of sun, the applause of hundreds raining around me like shooting stars. Here still, on this, Amrapali's word won't change. Amrapali won't change, never will. I write about other things too, not just crazy women. We'll come to those in a minute. Allow me my one last crazy woman, and then we'll move on to some other poems. I had to read you this one. It's a short one about the 12th century Kannada mystic yet again, but a better known one than Sule Sankava. This is Akka Mahadevi. Akka Mahadevi, as many of you know, chose to strip off every shred of cultural and social restraint. We are told she chose to walk the world naked. She met a community of like-minded people, a poetic community, a spiritual community. It could have been her satsang, but she still chose to leave and walk alone. That idea of the naked woman mendicant fascinates me. I actually met a woman some years ago in the wilds of Tamil Nadu, somewhere between Kanchipuram and Chengalpet. Annapurni Amma. I walked into her little ashram, not knowing what to expect, and I saw this woman resplendent and naked, wearing her body like a lion. And I couldn't tear myself away from her, and so I sat with her for many hours and went back and recorded a conversation with her. And that became the subject of an essay that went into another book, Women Who Wear Only Themselves. There is something utterly invulnerable about someone who allows themselves to become that vulnerable. There is nothing to conceal, nothing to defend, nothing to prove. And there's a freedom about that which fascinated me. It still does. If Akka had been here, I'd have asked her a bunch of questions as well. And since she isn't, here's the poem. Questions for Akka Mahadevi. Akka, of the unfurled hair and unpeeled heart, why does it take forever to wear this body like it isn't a hand-me-down? To shrug off the bulletproof vest even inside the home? To bring back every prodigal star and sullen comet under the skin? To stop winding the self like a bandage around the red wound of our smallness? To feel the wind in our hair? And sometimes Akka replies, enter the body like a summer ocean. Unzip the serpent skin and go swimming, sister. Your hair wind-soaked, your heart empty. No longer sealed, sold, concealed, patrolled, defined, transacted, underlined, contracted, sheared, broken, tonsured, bespoken, liberated, mended, emancipated, defended. That's all it takes. Go skinny dipping in yourself. The last 2 or perhaps 3 poems before we move on. I sometimes write about tailors, not just women. This is a male tailor. And I do believe that there's been a great deal of conversation around the end of the world, and that enters many of these poems. What does it mean, the end of the world? I have no idea, but many of the characters in this book ask that question. I don't know what it means, but I know that if the world ends, I'd like to believe it won't happen because of a bunch of self-important men in the corridors of power. I like to believe it might happen because of the death of a tailor down the road. The tailor. I knew a tailor beneath a peepal tree, flanked by a dog that was always asleep. He walked 20 miles to reach his tree, never looked up from his Singer sewing machine, never took holidays, even when the roads flooded and the skies blazed, and when the buses stopped, and then the trains, when shutters came down and doors slammed and the plague raged. He sewed masks. Except that one day his heart decided to lock down. And then a denim sky was rent apart. Buttons bursting, hemlines snagging, zippers flying, elastic. He left behind an unspooling sky, a whirring machine that knew all about songs outliving their singers. And he left behind a planet, unraveling all the time into a more perforated, ready-to-wear, original, closer to what another man under a peepal tree seemed to know 2,500 years ago. All because he'd been survivor enough to darn his share of black holes, seamster enough to know that an awakening is often an unseeming, Indian enough to have seen the world end many times over. And the last couple of poems. There was a time when the image of the poet, as we all know, at least the 19th century image of the poet, was that of the poet in the garret, in the attic, angular, emaciated, impoverished, preferably tubercular. And thankfully that image is a thing of the past, and we don't want to be perpetuating that. But it can be disconcerting sometimes to find the new world of the lit fest, where poets have suddenly turned glamorous, and they find themselves writing transit lounge poems and doing things that seem a little strange to me at times. And yet this is a poem of self-implication. I'm very aware that I'm part of this new world as well, which is a not so subtle hint to go and pick up the book. Poets need to survive. But I'm ambivalent about it as well. The marketplace of poets. You want the biodegradable poet, the one who reeks of someplace else where silence pours like lava. But here, in the roiling marketplace, the challenge is to love the rest. The shiny ones, the chatty ones, those with the green eyes of jadugars, the flabby ones. Hypoallergenic, compostable, made of Polynesian pink sugar, recyclable. Those who know the king and those who know the queen. Those whose heads churn with serpents, the glamorous, the has-been. Those who follow the tailwinds of the gods who ride on Merkabahs, poets of paraben and formaldehyde. Let your gaze take them all in. The fallen, the forgetful, the hungry-eyed. For you've been there too. Suspended between trust and terror, fevered, learning to surf the tide. And you've known the doubting, and you've known the seething, and you know how easy it is to forget that wide, that wider breathing. And yes, you know the irony, that even those committed to their own guilt-edged glory, and even those committed to some vaporous cause, seem to know at times how to sing with word, and sometimes, just sometimes, how to singe with pause. I will conclude with a fun, there were a few poems in this category, but I'm choosing one fun poem to assure you that poets write about, well, all of these have been joyous in their own way, I believe, but sometimes poets can just be fun, straightforward fun and little else. So this is an anthem to chai. It's also an anthem to women. And if you're not a woman, but you enjoy chai, enjoy your caffeine, this poem could be for you. When two women drink chai together. All's well in the world when two women drink chai together. Time holds its breath, star anise glitters, ginger gives up the ghost, lemongrass grows rogue, cinnamon is less sinned against than sinning. Bodhidharma awakens when two women drink chai together. Aeolian harps trill, kettle drums roll, mind meets heart, part becomes whole. Apothecaries smile and sommeliers sing, Lao Tzu intones the Tao Te Ching, Nilgiri meets Darjeeling when two women drink chai together. Froth of jade, jewel dew, ancient cauldron, friendship brew. One's a hermit, ten's a jamboree. The perfect number is always 3. A cackling duo and a pot of tea. Two women drinking chai together. There will be time to love our men, but not when caffeine meets estrogen. The defense budget and the state of AI must stand aside as earth meets sky. Ours is not to question why teaspoons tango and hippos fly when two women drink chai together. There will be a time when both God and beast are included in our cosmic feast. And one day it won't be out of line to quaff a martini or a bottle of wine. But right now, friends, it's been too long. Ooh long, ooh bloody long, since two women drank chai together. Thank you. What we thought we'd do was to have this conversation and then allow it very organically to open up.
Where is your chai?
There is a woman poet who is having chai with grandmothers from different mother tongues. India has always been a land of multiple mothering. And here is a poet who's having chai, a relaxed chai in her mica of multiple mother tongues. So, you must have seen for yourself what this poet does. You know, in this world of fleeting, fragile world of very fleeting concerns, She writes the kind of stuff which radiate, what to say, a sensation of eternity. Sensation, I say, yes. You've seen this, you've read the poems, you've heard her read the poems. A kind of vastness, beyondness, something limitless, oceanic, if I say. And like her grandmother poets, she is also the one, as Ashokji quoted rightly, who can see that the emptiest of rooms are the brightest, are so full of sun. Now, the sense of void, the urgency to shrug off, where do you get it from? I mean, I'm reminded of कबीर फुटा कम कुंभ जल में कुंभ में जल है बाहर भीतर पानी फुटा कुंभ जल जल ही समाना यह तत् कथो ज्ञानी. That kind of void, emptiness, which comes after shrugging off everything before the boundaries dissolve and the cosmic flows into the commonplace in your poems. And sometimes the political also flows across, crosses boundaries and flows across personal. You seem to be playing some kind of a Rudra Veena. I can imagine, I can very well see you as a Rudra Veena, playing this emptiness, this sense of void, the kind of reverberations you gather from your mica of multiple mother tongues. How you lay your head, tired, exhausted head, in the lap of the mother tongues before you have chai with them. So how about this idea of, how could you shrug off everything? And in a way, you were also like a flute, a Rudra Veena, full of void. And that's why I suppose you could handle so much. Like Keats, you also have some kind of negative capability of letting all these people walk into you. Different people, you're a city of such mothers, neglected mothers. Tell me about your journey. I think everybody would be interested in knowing about your journey.
I love that phrase. Is the song? I love. No. It's working now.
We need some help.
Seems to work now. Yes, thank you.
Yes.
I love that phrase about the mica of multiple
Mother tongues. Yes.
I'll hang on to that one. As I said, I'm going to find a tangential way to enter this enormous question. I found my way into these women's lives because I needed them, as I mentioned earlier. And I needed them as a reminder of the kind of ancestry that I wished I had grown up knowing of. Why did I never grow up knowing of Soirabai and, Akka Mahadevi I did hear of, but why did I never grow up hearing of Lakshminkara and Amrapali, Punnika? There are just so many. There are 56 women poets in that book. Why did I never grow up hearing of them? I believe that these could be a possible ancestry for anyone who wants to claim that ancestry. But for me, I see them as a living sisterhood. I will say this, Anamika, there are times when my own journey has felt so terrifyingly empty, that it is only this dead poet society that has kept me going.
I remember once you told me, may I leak it out? The way you've been leaking us everything, I may leak out a little secret between the two sister poets. Once when we were in Assam, she told me, when I was a child, I held my little young older sister's pigtail or plait, whatever she had, before I bed too. So this holding on, this whole idea of holding on to the tradition, recharging the mobile of tradition, and planting the intertexts into the new soil. This is what you've done, and this must have, as you were reading them, were you reading them aloud? I have always found, when I read your poems aloud in the loneliest hours of my life, they actually they seem to be reeking of a kind of foreignness which you have actually made very intimate. So this intimacy of tone, because you deal with the question of relationship and relationship across centuries, across traditions, the whole idea of gaining this kind of intimacy and informal, you've gained this informal tone of chit-chat. And you are, just because, the Navarasas are flowing into one another. There was a time, you remember, when the 9 rasas were hanging on 9 vessels, in 9 different vessels. And now something happened in your poems, that these 9 vessels of 9 rasas, somebody struck them down and all the 9 rasas have been flowing into one another. Vatsalya, all kinds of Navarasa. So this mixing of attitudes and emotions is something which makes you very metaphysical and very close also to the other, confessional poets like Sylvia Plath and Annie Sexton.
Yes, I think the word that you mentioned, which resonated right away, which I think is the cornerstone of bhakti poetry, which is what drew me to it, is the word intimacy. And I don't think I grew up realizing that, Anamika. I grew up listening to bhakti poetry, thinking of it as a kind of goody-goody poetry. I thought of it as, a bunch of sanctimonious people at bhajan sitting together and feeling good about themselves and, offering each other a pat on the back. And I looked at it with a kind of disdain until my life was derailed at a certain point in time. And when my life was derailed, and there was nothing to hold on to, certainly not the Sisters Platt or anything else, not even that very tradition, which seemed to me remote and really inaccessible and unreal. At that time, when I found a spiritual practice that I could call my own, the only poets I could read were the mystics. Because there is something about the mystic poets. At the time, this came through to me very strongly and very compellingly. The only thing I could read was them because there is something full-throated about that poetry. There is something hoarse about that poetry. There is something that refuses to join the dots and yet seems to be pointing insistently somewhere. That grabbed me. And that was when I rediscovered the bhakti poets, when a spiritual journey began to intensify and take on a certain urgency. I rediscovered the bhakti poets and read them in a way that I had never read them earlier. And I realized that what grabbed me about them most of all was this intimacy. This intimacy which allows them to quarrel with the divine, to shake a fist at the divine, to hurl cuss words at the divine, to banish the divine, to sometimes devour the divine, make love to the divine, all of that. And as Tukaram finally says, for me, God is dead. The same Tukaram who loves his Vittala is also capable of saying, for me, God is dead. And I believe that what the bhakti poets do is, they're capable of quarreling, but never ceasing to love this God. That to me became, it left me gobsmacked and wanting to know more. And it is that intimacy that draws me to them, and I think is an integral part of these poems, because I see these poems as a tribute to these women, but I do not see these as solemn tributes, as you can see. Sule Sankava is not solemn by any stretch of the imagination. For far too long, I think we've been encouraged to believe that the word sacred is synonymous with solemn. There's nothing solemn about these guys. They're as irreverent as they come. And that is the tradition. That is an integral part of the tradition, which we may sometimes lose sight of. The Ninda Stuti, which is the license to argue with your God, but never cease to love him or her.
And we have had poets like Suradas,
Yes,
who
so
have built up characters, in Brahma Geet, who've been arguing all through, fighting the whole idea of Preeti Kala, the whole idea of playfulness, the whole idea. So let's talk about the idea of upside down women, because grace and gravitation, these are the two opposite poles, I suppose. If grace pulls you up, gravitational forces, higher material instincts, they pull you down. And there comes a point when you're just nowhere. And, before flight, some birds also, enter into this mode of gymnastics before the final takeoff. So, spell it out, I suppose. This is the right time, because when Yes says the center cannot hold, things fall apart and the center cannot hold. Here, you've got a center, as you've said, you've got an anchor, and still things are falling apart. Not only are things falling apart, but the time itself is falling apart, out of joint. So this idea of belonging to the nowhere realm, what kind of idea do you generate here when losing grip over your own self and taking a flight, a quantum leap to the other world, the world where you have people who do not have faith, they can call it a eureka moment when you really do not belong to a frame. So how do you, talk about your intertextual flights and the techniques of, nailing them down into proper poetry, laughing poetry, Medusa like laughter.
Okay, I will say this, that in a world that is upside down, women who are upside down may actually be the right side up. So I was very aware of that when I was putting these poems together. These are women who offer me, as I say, they offer me survival strategies.
Yes, you said so.
Yes, they've been there, done that. They tell you how to walk aslant. They tell you the best nickname for your God. They tell you how to go skinny dipping in yourself. They tell you how to walk naked. They tell you how you can take selfies and conceal yourself and divest yourself at the same time. They give you all kinds of strategies for living. There's also Patachara, the largely unknown Buddhist nun, who tells us in a very quiet poem, which I have in this book, she tells us how she was awakened. And it's not a dramatic thunderclap awakening. It's just about going into her little cell, washing her feet, watching the water flow from the higher level to the lower, going to her lamp, pulling up the wick, and being awakened.
Yeah.
As undramatic as that.
Right.
To me, that kind of terribly quiet, nondescript moment needed to be documented, needed to be celebrated. There's a beautiful line by the contemporary British poet Carol Satyamurthy, who says, "One quiet woman is much like another. Two quiet women can take on the world and his brother." That kind of woman, spunky women, but who are able to allow the smallness of their lives, the ordinariness of their lives, to be the path of illumination for them. They are not, therefore, it's not urjayega Hans. It's not that. In fact, they are telling us gravity does not, to come back to your gravity and grace analogy, They know how to play with gravity. And this eventually, Anamika, is what poetry seeks to do.
Right. It's a kind of leela.
It is a play with grace and gravity. It is a play with you. It's about being terrestrial and being aerial and plummeting and being subterranean.
Right.
You know, I know as a child, when I grew up in Bombay and I was probably 3 or 4, surrounded by languages, it didn't feel like a mica necessarily at that time. It just felt all in. It doesn't. It just felt all in. Yes. But I did know this. I knew there were 2 kinds of language. There was prose, which to me at that time was grown-up language. That is transactional language. You want something, you ask for it, you may get it, you may not. Very much the language that is terrestrial, of this earth, pedestrian language. It walks, it plods. But it seemed to me when I heard nursery rhymes or when I heard little bits of doggerel, that there is another kind of language that doesn't walk. It is unpredictable, it is mercurial, it is dangerous, it is full of surprises, right?
Hey, they did.
That's right. It's playful, all of that. And that to me is poetry. And that has remained that magic parallel language, without which my life would have been just so impoverished.
When you were talking about, the sacred and the profane walking hand in hand, I was also, and levity and seriousness as they call it, I was also reminded of Mirabai. You've talked about walking in different ways, but Mirabai, like you, has been dancing with words. There is a line from her, you must be, I'm just bringing it to your notice, reminding you. Pag ghungaru ban mera nachi re. The whole idea of dancing with words and with ghungarus on, which Kulvadus were not supposed to wear. Kulvadus were supposed to be happy with their little tinkling, suhag ke nupur kind of a sensation. But she is the one who felt like, dancing with her ghungaru on. And that, the reverberation of that ghungaru has now traveled to your poems. And, all the poets who matter, including your teacher, like, I feel like you would be wanting to talk to Eunice D'Souza.
She was one of very different. Eunice was important in my life, but really not. Her poetics are very different. But what I will say, I love your Mira metaphor because it actually takes me back to the Wild Women session we did with which you both were present last year, where I think it was Pavan Verma who said, why wild women? Is that not, he asked me why wild, it made him uncomfortable. I think Poonam said it made her uncomfortable, the word wild. And it took me time to what I wanted really to convey, which I realized I didn't have to stop and convey at all because Meera had done it before me. When she calls herself Bavri, she's already telling us the way in which she wants to be seen in these poems. Hair open, that's why Akka Mahadevi likewise, hair unfurled, naked, Meera, with her gungrus. There is that spirit of abandon, but there is also, as we all know in poetry, great control.
Yes, diction.
Great control, great precision.
And your use of metaphors also. The way you juxtapose opposites in your phrases.
I didn't want it, as I said, because I didn't want it to be solemn. I wanted these women to speak a language in my poems that is conversational, that is informal, that is sometimes slangy. You'll find the rhythms of rap sometimes in there. Right. You'll find very staccato beats, very modern in that way. I wanted it that way.
The whole idea of purity of emotions and attitudes and language, the mixing of registers as they, and even the intergeneric mix, they're wonderful. They've come out wonderfully well in your poems. And now let's also talk about the kind of role model. I mean, when we look at these mystics, I always think there is a line from Vidyapati, a Hindi, Maithili poets in the 14th century he wrote. there's a line, Piya mora balak, ham taruni, Piya leli godak, chalali bajar. A woman who was married to a 2-year-old, a young woman, almost 16, not prettifully young, but still, the man. I have always found women finding nature or God as a spear, as a husband substitute. Because they could not find the kind of men they could fall in love with in the world around. These Bhakta poets had to, look up above the world so high in the dark, like a diamond in the sky, whatever constructs, twinkled. Shiva, for instance, or Krishna, who were boundless in some way. No one talks about Rama, all these women poets. Now, I was wondering why. The kind of lovable men, the idea of discovering or creating a person to fall in love with. How is this quest still on? Are people still imagining the kind of constructs they would like to fall in love with? Is the world still full of hyper-masculine men who are very difficult to fall in love with? What is your idea? Because you've been working on the idea of a Manchita Purush, lovable person. Because many women want to stay single. Nowadays, young girls, many of my students. And then when I teach them Bhakti poetry in translation, they would say, my God, these people also had to fly to some other realm to, to look for the right match. If you want to answer, do that.
I will say one thing. I don't want to become solemn, but I will say that I didn't see this very much as women who look for the ideal man because they're not able to find him, though it may well have been the case in some cases, in some instances. The way I see it is the Bhakti poets allow themselves this notion of God as almost an archaeological implement. It allows you to use the notion of God, whether as a lover, whether as a husband, whether an illicit relationship, whether a legitimate one, whether it's a child. Many of these women speak of Krishna, but as a mother. So the goddess metaphor actually permeates a lot of the Bhakti poetry. A lot of the women actually speak of Vittha Ai, the mother. So you use this God any which way you want, whatever your psyche dictates. And you allow that to become your ally, your guide, your companion. You allow this guide to accompany you to difficult places in your own consciousness. And when you have actually allowed that to happen, then perhaps what the Bhaktas call the union is complete. There are no more roles, there's no more God and devotee, there's no more sacred and secular. That divide has been bridged.
In your quest of your own deeper self. Yeah, please. The floor is open for questions.
Is that why you opened it, Ashok?
I was only asking someone to take the mic.
Oh, I see.
Someone speaks. Is there someone?
Yes, there's someone right there. And pauses are fine too. Fine with pauses.
Yeah, better. Yes. Please be brief and ask question. Okay.
Yes. I wanted to ask, I think you began with the idea of, the women that you write about, the women whose words you channel, that about self-declaration and self-reclamation. And I just wondered, as you were researching your previous book and exploring this one, did you, in their own words, in their writing, did you find sort of any tensions between their samarpan as well as their unapologetic sense of self?
I think those tensions are what make the poems interesting. You know, and the tensions, when there are those tensions, poetry comes alive. So time and again, yes, certainly, which is why the earlier book, the Bhakti book, is actually organized according to tone, where you can long for God, rage at God, doubt God. There's room for all of that. And it makes for poetry of great texture and great tonal complexity. And that is really its strength. So it's not some kind of facile surrender at all. In fact, if anything, I believe the very word surrender needs to be looked at again because it has been so misused and so abused. I like to believe it's not surrender to authority, it is surrender to love, which is very different. Very different.
Yes? Please. The mic is there. Yeah.
This is just a comment. A Google misspelling, a love of anagram, where it becomes wired, poet electric, a very Ashwatha upside down tree, this woman and her gallery are.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Is there somebody else?
Remind me to take that from you. That and the mica of mother tongue.
Well, friends, with that we come to the end of the evening. As you have heard and seen, we have spent a little more than an hour with a wonderful contemporary poet, connecting us with all kinds of other forgotten, less remembered, unnamed people of our own ancestry, as poets, as human beings, as Indians. So it has been a wonderful, thank you very much, Arundhathi, and thank you very much, Anamika ji, for this conversation. And thank you very much, all of you. If you haven't bought the book, please do. And not only buy and keep it in your drawing room almirah, but read it. It is delightful reading, I can assure you that. And thank you very much.